My captain's whole briefing on the drowning was one sentence. Close it fast, and do not, under any circumstances, talk to the woman who came in off the water. Of course, I didn't close it, and I did talk to her. I just wish I'd read the file on why he was so afraid of her first. There are towns the sea built, and there are towns the sea is still deciding whether to keep. Ardloch is the second kind. You smell it before you see it. Diesel and herring and cold stone. And then the fog opens just enough to show you the breakwater, this long gray arm of granite the town threw out into the North Atlantic 140 years ago to hold the water back. It doesn't hold anything back. It just gives the sea somewhere to break. I grew up 2 valleys over. I knew the rules before I could read. Nobody in Ardloch swims. Nobody walks the breakwater after dark. When a boat doesn't come back, you don't say drowned. You say the water took him. And you say it the way you'd talk about the weather, because that's what it is here. A thing that happens. A thing that's owed. I came back to Ardloch as a detective sergeant at 43, which is a thing men do when their lives somewhere else stop working. I had 22 years on the job and a drawer full of closed cases and exactly one rule of my own. I read the file, all of it, before I do anything else. So when they put the drowning on my desk and told me not to read the only file that mattered, I want you to understand, I never had a choice. Reading it was the only thing I knew how to do. The file was about a woman. In every town that lives off the sea, there's someone the grieving go to. A priest, an old woman who keeps the rosaries. In Ardloch, for 4 years, it had been her, the one who came in off the water with no name and no memory. The one even the men who'd open you over a debt would not say a word against. They called her the listener. Some of them called her the saint. She called herself Lena, and I'll tell you in a minute where she got the name, because it's the first thing about her that stopped me cold. This is what happened when I read the file. They lifted Cahill Brody out of the harbor at 6 in the morning, and the fog was so thick the harbor master had to find the body by the sound the gulls were making over it. Brody was 31, ran with the crews that moved things in and out of Ardloch that didn't go through customs. Not a hard man, just a near one, the kind who's always in the room when something happens. The water had him face down against the inner wall, and his pockets were full, which is the detail I kept coming back to. Men who go in by accident lose things. Brody hadn't lost anything. Podrick, the harbor master, was already there when I arrived, 70 years old in a coat that had seen every winter of it. Tide didn't take him out, he said. Tide tried. He came back in twice. Came back in? Twice, he said, and looked at the water like it had told him something rude. The coroner came down at 8. Dr. Maeve Sayer, who'd done every body Ardloch had produced for 2 decades, and had a face like she'd run out of surprise sometime in the 90s. She crouched, lifted Brody's hand, held it, and put it down slower than she'd picked it up. "How long's he been in?" I asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. "You don't sound sure." She wiped her hands on her coat and didn't answer that. "Talk to the brother," she said. "He's up by the chapel. He won't come down to the water." The brother's name was Sean, and he grabbed my sleeve before I'd finished saying who I was. "She warned him," he said. "Who did?" 3 days ago, she told Cahill the water already had his name down. His grip was bad. She'd know. The water's the one that gave her hers. "Who are we talking about, Sean?" He let go of my sleeve like it had gone hot. He looked at the breakwater and at the fog over it, and he said, "Don't say her name down here, not this close to it." That was the first time anyone refused to give me a name at a scene. It would not be the last. She lived above a chandlery on Key Street, up a stair that smelled of tar and rope. There was a lifeboat hull propped in the yard below, retired, the name still painted on the bow. Lena May. That's where she got it. She'd washed up beside that boat 4 years ago with nothing in her head, and when they'd asked her name, she'd read it off the only thing near her that had one, and kept the first half. She opened the door before I knocked. People always make that detail spooky. It isn't. The stair creaks. What I couldn't explain came later. She made tea she didn't drink. "You're the new one," she said. "They told you not to come." "They did." "They always do." She studied me. "And you came anyway because you read things." I hadn't told anyone that. I asked about Brody. I expected what you always get. The warning made vague after the fact, the way these things firm up into prophecy once the body's found. That isn't what she gave me. "Cahill came to me a week ago to ask about his father," she said. "His father went down off the Marin Bank in '98. Cahill wanted to know if he'd suffered." She turned the cup a quarter turn on its saucer. "I told him what his father wanted me to tell him, and his father wanted me to tell him to settle his accounts before the spring tides, because the water doesn't forget who owes it." "And you took that to mean—" "I didn't take it to mean anything. I just say what they give me." She looked at me with no drama in it at all, which was worse than drama. "Detective, the dead aren't subtle. People think they speak in riddles. They don't. They're just very far away, and the line is bad." Then she said the thing. She said, "Your sister still has the bracelet, the one she thinks she lost the day they buried your mother. It's behind the drawer in the spare room. It slipped down the back." I have a sister. My mother drowned off a beach in Donegal when I was 9. The bracelet was real. I had never told a living person in Ardloch any of it. I stood up too fast. The tea went over. "You should go," Lena said gently, mopping it with her sleeve, "before you start needing this more than they do." I went, but I'd stopped being a man closing a drowning and started being a man reading a file. And the file, it turned out, was the only thing in Ardloch nobody would let me have. The first thing I did was the thing she'd told me not to need. I drove to my sister's that weekend. I didn't tell her why. I went into the spare room and pulled out the drawer, and I reached down behind it, into the dust, and my fingers closed on the bracelet. Thin gold. My mother's. I sat on the floor of my sister's spare room and held it for a long time. Then I went back and started asking the men who used her. I want to be careful here because this is where it stops being one detective's strange morning and becomes the kind of thing where the same story keeps coming back to you from people who have never met each other. That's the part you can't argue with. One witness is a mind playing tricks. 6 is a town. Sweeney was a fixer, the man you saw if you needed something the law didn't sell. He'd done 11 years across 3 sentences and feared nothing I could think of. "Course I've been to her," he said. "Everybody's been to her. You don't tell anyone, but everybody's been." He told me she'd found a man for him, a partner who'd gone over the side off a trawler with 40,000 of Sweeney's money. The body was never recovered. Lena had told Sweeney the man wasn't out at sea at all, that he'd never made it past the breakwater. They'd found him 3 days later, wedged in the granite below the low water mark, exactly where she'd said, the money still strapped to him. How'd she know where he was? Sweeney looked at me like I was slow. She didn't know where he was. She talked to him. He told her. The Donnelly crew said the same kind of thing, different details. A name nobody could have known. A debt nobody had written down. A grandmother's grave they'd been arguing over the location of for years, and Lena describing the headstone before she'd ever left her room. Every single one of them protected her. That was the part that got under my skin worst. These were men who'd inform on their own brothers to shave a year off a sentence, and not one of them would talk to me about who she actually was. When I pushed Sweeney on it, he leaned in close on the key, and all the easiness went out of his voice. "There's a file," he said, "on where she came from. Harbor master's got it in the safe, sealed since the year she washed up. Podrig'll die before he opens it." He held my eye. "And so should you, detective. Leave her be. Whatever's in that box, it's keeping the rest of us breathing." So now I knew two things. There was a file, and the worst men in Ardloch were guarding it like it was load-bearing. I went to the coroner before I went to the safe. I wanted one fact I could stand on. Maeve Sayer met me at the morgue and pulled off her gloves and told me two things she said she'd never put in a report. The first was that Cahill Brody had been warned by name 3 days early, and that she'd confirmed it with 3 separate people. The second, she said while looking at the steel drawer, not at me. "I shook that woman's hand once," she said, "at a funeral, 4 years ago, just after she came." She paused. "Her hands were colder than the man on my table this morning. And I've thought about it every day since, and I have no way to write that down that doesn't end my career." How cold. She just looked at me. Some answers are the not answering. I didn't break into the harbor master's safe. I did something worse. I went to the records office and pulled every unidentified body recovered from Ardloch water in the last 10 years. Because a sealed file is one thing, but the cold case drawer belongs to the state, and nobody had told me not to read that. My predecessor had. His name was Finch, Detective Sergeant Aldous Finch, the man whose desk I'd inherited. There were 3 detectives before me on the long, thin thread of cases that touched her, and not one of them had quit. They'd just stopped, one after another, across the years. Finch's last entry in the master log wasn't a sentence. It was a single date, written 11 times down the page, the handwriting getting worse each line, like a man trying to make himself believe it. The date was the 4th of November, 4 years ago. The morning Lena washed up beside the Lena May. I typed it into the system. Then I typed her in. There was no record of her anywhere on Earth before that morning. No birth, no passport, no print, no face in any database I could reach. She did not exist before the 4th of November. And in the cold case drawer, in a folder my predecessor had paper-clipped shut, was a Polaroid he hadn't wanted anyone to find. Case 04-117. An unidentified woman, recovered from the inner harbor by the breakwater. Drowned. Never claimed. Never named. Date of recovery? The 3rd of November. The night before. I pried the paper clip off and looked at the photograph, and I was looking at a face I had shaken hands with that same week. The same small scar through the left eyebrow. The same set to the mouth. The woman in the morgue photo, the unclaimed body nobody came for, the Jane Doe who went into the ground in the Pauper's Row behind St. Brendan's, was Lena. They'd buried her on the 2nd of December. There's a stone. I've seen it. No name on it, just a number. She washed up alive the next morning, 100 yards from where they'd pulled her out dead the night before. I should have gone to my captain. I went back up the stair instead. I had the photograph in my coat. I put it on her table, face up, between us. She looked at it for a long time. "I always knew there was a thing I wasn't being told," she said. Quiet. I could feel the shape of it, like a word you can't reach. "Lena, that's you." "I know. That's a body from the night before you—" "I know," she said again. And she didn't cry, and that was the worst of it. Then it started. The room got cold. Not draft cold. The cold off the photograph, off the morgue drawer, off the water under the breakwater. My breath came out white. The window over the harbor went gray with fog from the inside. "They're here," she said. "They came up with you." "Who?" "The angry ones." She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the empty corners of her own room, at the chairs nobody sat in, and her face was doing something I'd never seen a living face do. The ones who went down fighting it. They don't like the ones who came back wrong. They think it isn't fair. The tea things rattled. A cup went off the table and didn't break. It hung, a half-second too long, the way Brody's body wouldn't go out with the tide. I heard them then. Not voices. The line was bad, like she'd said. A sound like a crowd underwater, far off, getting closer. Like a great many people talking at once through a great deal of water, and every one of them saying the same thing. And the thing they were saying was a name. And I understood with my whole body that the name was hers. And I understood the rest of it. She talks to the drowned because she is one of them. She has no past because she didn't have a life. She had a death on the 3rd of November, and the water sent her back up the next morning to do a job. The dead she spent 4 years speaking for, the lost trawlerman and the over-the-side fixers and a 9-year-old's mother off of Donegal Beach. They aren't her clients. They're her people. She is the door. She is the bad line. She is the one the sea keeps on this side so it can still reach the ones who loved them, the ones and the file in the harbor master's safe, the one the worst men in Ardloch would die before they opened. It isn't protecting them from her, it's the receipt. It's the list of what the water is still owed, and every name on it, sooner or later, the harbor takes back. The fixers knew. That's why they fed her, why they revered her, why they begged me to leave her be. As long as she's standing between the town and the water, doing the seas listening for it, the rest of them get a little more time before their name comes due. 3 detectives before me got too close. None of them quit. The harbor took them. Their files end mid-sentence. I'd read mine. I'd opened the photograph. I'd shaken her hand the way Maeve Sayer shook her hand, and her hand was colder than the body on the table. And now my hand was cold too, and it had been since I left her stare the first time, and I'd told myself it was the season. "You should go," Lena said, the way she'd said it before. But this time she was crying. For me, I think. And the underwater crowd was at the window now, and the fog was pouring up through the floorboards. "Go now. Don't go near the water. Whatever you do, don't let it learn the way you take home." I went down the stairs so fast I don't remember the steps. I filed it the way they told me. Cathal Brody, accidental drowning, no suspicious circumstances, case closed. My captain read it and nodded, and never once asked me whether I'd talked to her. I think he already knew that everyone does in the end. I think the order was never really an order. I think it was a warning he was required to give and required to watch me ignore, the way the man before him gave it to him. This morning, a woman washed ashore on the breakwater. No name, no memory, no record of her anywhere before today. Padraig found her by the sound the gulls were making, the same as Brody, and he called it in, and then he called me, and all he said on the phone was, "It started again. You'll want to know what that means." I haven't gone down to look. I'm not going to, because I finally understand what Ardloch is. It isn't haunted. Nothing here is restless or lost. It's staffed. The sea keeps one of the drowned up on this side to do its listening, and when that one's account finally closes, it sends up another. Lena was never the mystery. She was the most recent hire. She's still in the room above the chandlery. The grieving still go to her. The fixers still feed her. And somewhere out past the granite, in the cold under the low water mark, there is a folder that isn't paper. There's a list. My name is on it now. I put it there myself the morning I decided to read the only file I was told to leave shut. I keep the bracelet on my desk. My mother's. The one Lena found behind a drawer in a house she'd never been to. I look at it when my hands get cold, which is always now. I haven't been warm since I shook her hand. There are more things in heaven and earth than we put in our reports. The sea is one of them. It gives and it takes and it keeps very careful books. And the most frightening thing I have learned in 22 years of this work is not that the dead can speak. It's that someone has to answer the phone. In one cold morning, 100 yards from a retired lifeboat with half a name painted on the bow, the water is going to call. And I'm going to know the voice. Thank you for sitting with us at the campfire tonight. To everyone who listens, who shares these stories, and who keeps this fire lit week after week. And if you're not ready to leave just yet, the story I'd put in your hands next is the one more people have watched than anything else we've ever told around this fire. A Special Forces team sent into a Cold War mountain facility erased from every map, looking for caretakers who'd stopped answering the radio 2 weeks earlier. Their standing orders came down to a single line of white paint on a stairwell, a line no one was ever, under any circumstances, to cross. Lena carried the voices of the drowned. The thing waiting below that line wears them. It's on your screen now. We'll see you below the mountain.